All right, good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. I'm Lorraine Maffa, Programming Coordinator for Loudoun County Public Library, and it's my pleasure to introduce our painter today, an artist. Mekhla Salimani was born and raised in India and has lived in Loudoun County for over 2 decades. Much of her art is inspired by her rich, vibrant Indian culture and by the natural beauty in her new home. She is an architect and product designer by education and currently a coach in technology that influences product development, process, and delivery. Mekhla sells her paintings and original greeting cards at the Leesburg Farmers Market and donates much of the proceeds to charity. Watercolor is her favorite medium because it encourages freedom of expression. Welcome back, Mekhla.
Thank you, Lorraine. Always a pleasure to be here. Happy Friday, everyone. I look forward to these sessions, and especially today, as Lorraine said, watercolors is my favorite medium. And today we are actually just going to allow some paint and some techniques to, just bring out the best of the watercolors. So much freedom that watercolor offers with a little bit of manipulation here and there. So the plan for today, we will not need a pencil. As you see here, I don't have a pencil or an eraser. We will just use paints. I'll start with just one paper to show a few different techniques to do winter trees. And we will take those winter tree types and use different watercolor techniques to create 2 or 3 different winter landscapes. Now, I intend to use these as holiday cards. I personally like these because these are not very traditional. So, no matter what your family or friends, the holiday they celebrate, I think winter landscape could go for any of those without being too specific to a particular culture or tradition. And these could be really good New Year cards as well. So that's the plan for today. I have pieces of watercolor paper. These are 4 inches by 6 inches. We will be doing 2 vertical and 1 horizontal. Well, depends on the time we have, but I'm hoping to get at least 3 different winter landscapes done today. If you have anything bigger or smaller, that's okay. But keep in mind, if the paper is too big, you won't be able to do it fast enough because you'll be covering a lot more space. And this size, the 4 by 6, fits very well on a 5 by 7 cardstock like this. So this is 5 by 7, and you can easily glue a 4 by 6 on it. And then you have this foldable card. So the size works well for any standard envelopes that you may get in the market. So the material I have here, other than paper, is water in a small glass cup. I like to use these clear ones because I really sometimes lose track of how dirty my water is, and I start to see those shades in my painting. So clear cups always help. I'm keeping extra water on the side. And as we do wet and wet techniques, you'll see that we, for some part of the painting, you just want clean water. So it's good to keep extra water handy. I have some basic colors here: red, green, blue, and black. We will be doing a lot of blues and grays today, a little bit of green too. And it's always nice to have red. It's the holidays. You can always put a little red star on top of a tree, and that becomes so special. So that's what we're using for colors. I have 3 brushes, as if you've attended any of my sessions before. No particular brand name here. I don't even say any specific size. This is a 2. This is the second one is a 4, and this today is an 8. But it really is about, try different brushes, and then you'll start to have some favorites, and you'll just go for those for various different different uses. They're all round brushes. Of course, there are various different brushes in the market, but these should work for everything we need for today. I also have painter's tape here. I use this for masking. And I also use this to tape the paper down, which I won't be doing today because I'm not looking to get a border to it. However, in one of the scenes, I'm thinking of having a moon in it, like an evening winter landscape. So we'll cut out a circle from this to mask out a circle, which will become the moon when we peel it off. So I'll tell you more about this when we get to that one. So that's everything I have, and I do keep these kitchen towels handy. You It's funny, in watercolor you don't use a lot of color in your painting, but you constantly wash and uh, increase or reduce the quantity of water on your brush. So you will see, I sometimes laugh about it, that I wash off more paint than I use in my painting, but that's how watercolor works. So do keep a couple of these handy. And that's everything. Do we have any questions before we begin? All right, so I think we can get
No
started.
questions yet, Mekhla. I'll let you know.
All right, thank you, Lorraine. So I'm going to move this out for now. Keep the water slightly away so I don't tip that over. This is a little wet. So with the first piece of paper, we will just go over some of the tree types, some of the evergreens, or how trees look in winter. So you know how we're going to paint the trees, and then we'll put it in different landscape settings. So to begin with, I'm taking my finer brush. Keep your fine and a thicker brush handy. We won't need this one for just learning how to draw the trees. I'm using a pencil for a second just to talk through the tree types. And I hope, I'm sure you all observe, but the more I paint, the more I observe outside to kind of understand the difference, what makes one tree look different from another. And you will notice that the evergreens are, of course, conical shape. So if you are looking to do something very abstract or very simple, you could actually just draw a triangle and paint it, and this would make for a great. And trust me, these cards, I've done this before, they look so good when you do a bunch of triangles like this that depict evergreen trees, and just do a stem to or a trunk to it, put it in different colors, and you have a nice little card, right? So this is the overall shape or profile of an evergreen tree. Now, when we start to paint, you will see that in nature, you'll see all of these types. You'll, if this is the center of it, always think of a center, draw a center if you need to. You'll see that the leaves or the overall foliage could be going down like this and narrower at the top. So it's top to bottom. You can do free form lines like these. And this is a tree type. You don't need a pencil. I'm just doing this to talk about the different forms and make it wider, spread out at the bottom. That may be one type. Similarly, you could have this, and you'll see that on the top, you just see a few twigs, so you can do a little crisscross there. And then the branches start to spread out like almost horizontal with a little sweep to it. You will see a lot of such trees in the winter, and they have leaves that kind of droop down like this. So this is another one going down. And you will also see that there are trees that are narrow at the top and the branches go up this way. So down almost horizontal and up just getting wider at the base. You will see all of these in nature. These are the evergreens, and you could mix and match those, or you could have different types and different landscapes and choose to make it slightly different each time. So these are the different trees. We won't be doing anything with the triangle trees today, but we'll be using these three types. Or you can choose to use any of those. Now, the other things, the trees that are not evergreens, they have no leaves in winter. So in a winter landscape, you want to, sometimes you are drawing a tree that is just bare bones, just the branches in the winter landscape. So typically when you start to draw a tree, a non-evergreen tree, you want to start with the branch. Now what I would like to say is, looking for another piece of paper because I'm trying to show you what you shouldn't do. Don't draw a branch like this, like a thick branch, and expect the branches to be like this. sometimes you do this and they may not look right because that's not how a tree grows, right? You want to observe the foliage of a tree. They have some kind of pattern of growth. They may be growing tall, but they're not radiating from the center of the branch. That's symmetric. But when you're looking at the branches, you want to start with a trunk like this, and this is the trunk here. And try to be as free form as you can. So go a little to the right, then give it some thickness. Keep in mind this thickness would be less than the main branch in most cases. And at some point you want it to branch out too. So any branch could branch out into two, split into two like this. So when you're doing that, you want to go a little up or down or sideways and then branch it out. So when you branch it, you create a little V-like branch there. And in the winter, you'll see a lot of these. And as you go higher up, the branches are finer. But this is how you would show a, just the branches and no leaves on it. I'll always like to do a little branch here. It looks very natural that it's not just one main branch, but there are others. There may be a small one here. And this is how you could draw a winter tree with no leaves on it. All right, so we'll do this with paint now. I'm just going to flip this paper over. We don't need to draw because all of these are so natural and so easy to paint with color that it's just too much more effort to follow a drawing when you could do that directly with paint. So I'm going in here and let me just take some green color to get us started for just the sketch for now. And many trees, as it's cold, you'll start to see that they're not such bright green colors, and that's how winter trees are. We don't get a lot of sun. So starting with one of those trees, just do a very light straight line. It doesn't have to be continuous, but that's your guide. Start with the top, do a little X. That's the tip of the tree. And as you go by your holiday trees, Christmas trees, you see how it is very sparse on the top. And then you start from there. So on the top, you're trying to just make sure that you are giving it a nice fine start. And then as it's going down, if you notice, I've used the branches slightly up. So I'm going to continue that pattern. But all I'm doing is taking some paint and I'm just doing a little wiggle here. And 2 or 3 of the same size, and then you start to extend it out a little bit more. And the center where you put the little line will be always denser than the outer ends of the stems. So you can go in and fill that in. But this should be very simple. There are no rules. This is almost too fine for what we need for our cards. I'm switching over to the medium size brush because I'm going to the bottom. It's denser and I don't want to spend that much time doing fine branches when I don't need to. So really just wiggle it, keep the direction of the stems and spread it a little wider. Now what I see is if I took too much water, I'm not getting a nice dense green, which is great because you don't see a flat color when you look out at any tree. You just see a lot of different shades. Now I'm going to go in with some blue here. Blue can make your green much darker to use, so that's always nice. I'm going to put a little bit of black. What I'm trying to do here is to create a darker tone, and I'm going to go with that tone in the center. Wherever things are denser, you will have more shades and light not getting in there. So you want it to be darker in the center anyway. And at the bottom of these stems. So if you have to put a little dark tone, it would be on the underside of these because that's where it doesn't catch the light. Now, I'm not doing that right now, but if you were to put some snow on it, that would be on the top of these branches and you'd see that it's covered in some snow. I'm going to just wash my brush, not a lot of color in it. I'm just a wet brush. I'm trying to just go in and blend it in so it doesn't look too, no tree just branches out that perfectly. There's overlaps and blends, but that's really a tree, evergreen tree. The other type that I mentioned, when it goes down or droops down, you do the same thing. You start with the center line and you just go down like this. Do a little fine tip here, and then you are going down. Just wiggle it, little center is wider and then thins out on the outer side. Very similar to what you did, just the direction of the branches are changing. If you want to add a little fresh green, that's always fun, makes it a little brighter. So, it gets gloomy when we don't get the sun, but you want your card to have some more happy, cheerful colors. Feel free to use a lighter green. And that's another winter green. All right. And we'll also try to do the branches that we did in the little sketch here, how you would do it with the paint. I'm going to use just black for it. You could use a dark brown or use green and red. That would make a brown, and that would be just fine too for the branches. So what we're going to do is start with the main branch, just go up straight. It is always very artistic when you try to start out straight, then give the trunk a little bump, then make it turn a little to the side and then come back in. Each tree, if you observe, is different. And this is what you get to do here. Just kind of take it up a little bit, create a little branch, split it, let this go up, maybe even taller, split it. Now, when I see the bend here, maybe there's another branch coming out of here. I'm going to split that. I'm going to go here and split this. It gets finer as you go on the top. Another thing to note is when the branches get finer, you don't want very dense color, because it's the finer it is, you can't see it much. So what I just did, I reduced the quantity of color. I did not change the color, just less color in it, more water. So the finer tips of the branches you'll see are kind of just blending into the background, sometimes not visible when it's foggy or misty outside, and it just starts to disappear into the background. Any questions about these trees? We are going to now move into using these tree types in cards.
If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box or raise your hand and I can unmute you so you can speak to Mekhla directly.
I have been having so much fun doing these winter greens. And they're so quick once you get the hang of it. You can do short ones, tall ones. I have been amazed the more I observe that these trees can get really tall. Like some of the summer trees, they could get really tall, and you would, many of these, when you see them around the neighborhood, we are decorating them. They're about 7 feet tall, 8, 9, 10 feet tall, but I've seen them be hundreds of feet tall, and they just look so majestic, standing out in the misty winter weather. So with that, I'm going to keep this aside. This is for our reference, and we will try to put these to create cards. Now, the first one that we are going to do, this is going to take a few steps. We use very wet background, then we let it dry a little. We come back to do the second layer and the third layer, right? So the three cards, the reason why we are doing three is we don't want to waste the waiting time. So we'll put this aside, start working on the second one, then come back to this when this is ready enough for the next layer. So we'll be working on them a little bit simultaneously, back and forth between the three cards. All right, so as you can see here, my water has a green tone to it, and I have clear water here. I'm going to keep the clear water. It's not that green that I can't use it. So whenever I have a greenish color to use, I'll come back to it. But for now, I'm going to use the clear water. This first step for our first card, you want clear water and your thickest brush you have, just the fattest brush you have. You could use that because we're going to do a big wash for the entire card. So all I have on the brush here is clear water, nothing else. And we are going to use the clear water throughout this paper. On this card, we are hoping to create a very misty, dreamy winter feel to this. So all I'm doing is doing a wash. Now I don't want a big puddle or a pool here, so don't just pour water because that'll take so much longer for it to dry to do the additional layers. But you want it to be wet throughout because we are going to use the wet in wet technique, and that's how we will be doing that nice misty feel to it. All right, so I got the whole thing wet. And I'm also, you'll see it shine. That's because it's all wet. You also see it folding. That's okay. Once it is done, you will be able to flatten it with any weight on it. I usually like to tape this down, but since with the 3 cards, we'll be moving the cards out and then coming back to it. So I didn't want to tape it down for today. Now what I'm doing next is taking just a little bit of blue. And we don't want a very bright blue, just a simple blue. And if you'd like, I'm going to do that. I'm taking some blue here. And I'm just going to touch it with my brush with black, not a lot because black easily takes over. And just going to give that a little bit of that gray, foggy color to it. We don't need a lot. That's going to be enough to cover our entire card. So starting from the top, just take your brush from left to right or however you prefer. But I would recommend do not go back and forth and rub the paper. Just do it one stroke. It takes away the texture of the paper. And since your paper is already wet, the color is going to travel. And as it travels, it will fill in many of those spots. So you don't have to really worry about an open white spot. It will blend in. It's always nice to have a little lighter and darker tones in there. It looks natural, but it won't be like patches of different color. All right. We'll come back and put a little bit darker tone on the top, and we'll keep it lighter closer to where we will put the trees on. This is the wet in wet technique. We created a wet base and we are using very wet paint on top of it to use the blending, the natural blending of the colors on the paper. This is one of the best ways to do sky or water for the first layer. I'm going back with some more color to the top to get more color. What you don't want to do is to overwork the paper. Don't do that. Let the colors blend by themselves. And if you want to add more intensity in the color, come back and do the same thing or just wait for it to dry. But when you let the whole thing dry, you won't get an easy blend like this. Then you will see the next layer patching on it. So it's best to work on it now, unless we are trying to create a different effect. Now I'm going in with a little bit more blue. I want that to be nice and blue, especially when I put it on the cardstock. I want it to stand out and not be so devoid of color. Doing a little gray for the winter colors. But if you see, I'm adding color more to the top and not so much to the bottom, because that's where we will go in with the trees. Right. I want a lighter tone here. I think we're good. I'm going to switch over to the medium-sized brush to create the first layer of trees. Now, when you go out on your long drives in the winter on a misty day, you will notice the further out the trees or the even the mountains are, they are almost like blending into the background, and you can really not see the details of the leaves or the branches. You just see them blending, and you might see a profile. That's what we will do in our first layer. Before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and wipe the base because it's got some water from the first layer. Right. I'm waiting just maybe a few seconds because I do want the first layer to show not a lot of detail, but still a profile. If I put it on right now, it's going to blend in just like the background. I want it to be not too stand out, but just enough to get a profile. And I didn't do a lot of layers at the base, so this is a little bit more dry in this section than it is on the top. So I'm going in there with the same blue, but just a little bit more color, really not thick at all yet. We are still staying very close to the shades we used before, just a tad bit of more concentration of the color so it stands out, but it's still a lot of water in this. You see that? So I'm going in with my medium-sized brush, and we just talked about how we do the trees. So I'm going to start with the first layer and just do that little tree shape going down. You can do a little straight line here to see how you want the tree to be. But you really see this is still too wet, and I don't see a profile of the tree. But this one, you don't want to spend too much time, just get this shape right. Um, because this is not the frontmost tree, and it's going to be just the profile. I'm going to wait a little bit to come back to this. It's still too wet. Too wet. However, I don't want it to get too dry. I want some blending of the first layer. Just holding off. See, this part is drier, so the line is more visible than the top. So the top is blending a lot more. And the tops is what we really want to show, is because the others will be covered with the next layers of painting. We just want the top profile. All right, so I'm going to come back to it for just when it's a little drier. You start to see a little of this. This is just so much fun. I love this thing about watercolor, how it does so much with such little effort if you just use the right technique and timing. Control it when you need to, and let it be when it's doing fine on its own. So just hold off for, I'm going to wait maybe a few more seconds to come back and do some more trees here, the first layer. While we do that, do we have any questions, any comments?
Nothing yet.
All right, I'm going to mix a little bit more color because we're going to need it. Watercolor does test my patience often, which is good for me. It's practice. If you have a hair dryer, that makes a great tool for drying layers of watercolor. In this one, especially now, I wouldn't do that only because I don't want it to dry too much. So I'm going to go back, do a little line in the center and see it's a little dry, so you still see that. Maybe this should do it. This is my first layer, or maybe second now. You see how quickly I'm going through the branches, knowing that the details won't show. I could just do this. It's just so therapeutic. Doesn't need a lot of focus or too much pressure on doing it right, making it perfect. And just such beautiful cards, and so special if they're handmade for sending out to our loved ones. All right, I am going to pause here for this one, putting it aside. We'll prep card number 2 and come back to this and let this dry for our second layer of trees. Before we go into the second card, let's get the moon ready on the third card. So this is another 4x6 piece of watercolor paper. I'm going to use masking tape, drawing a circle on it to draw a moon and tape it so that I can easily do the background without worrying to stay away from the moon. So it's a simple circle here, cut it out to mask that area. That's the moon. See, going to cut it. If you have masking fluid, you could do that too. It's a fluid in a bottle and it dries pretty fairly quickly to mask out any areas that you'd like to color later. And you could get that at any art supply store. Not a perfect circle, but this should do it. This is tape here, a circle shape. And I would recommend to put it in the top half of the card. And if you remember the rule of thirds, we don't like to put the object of focus right in the center. It's in 1/3 quadrant from the left or the vertical. So I'm going to go about 1/3 from here, 1/3 from the top, and place the moon here. So that while the moon will get its attention, we don't want the only thing to be seen be the moon, and we want the eye to travel throughout the paper to appreciate the entire composition. So it might be hard to see here, but you see I've put tape on it, and that we'll peel it off once we do the background. Now, while we are at this, you might want to just draw a simple line here to show that in front, this is the snowy foreground, the ground part, and the tree will start from here and go into the top. So this will be the sky, this is the ground, and we'll do branches of a tree here. Just kind of trying to give you a sense of what we will be doing in this, just like the tree we painted here or the sketch that we made here. This may be hard to see, but I don't want to draw too much, and I'll use brush and paint directly to do this card as well. I'm going back to card number 1, not going to 2 just yet. because I think it's dry enough for me to do one more layer, and then we'll come back for a third in a little bit. Still using my medium-sized brush, getting some more color. Now I want more color than I had before, but not too dark. Like this is too much color. I'm going to add in some black to make it a little bit less bright. The brightest would be the layer that's closest to you with the most amount of detail. I think this might be fine. Let me try it. If not, I can come and tone it down a little bit. So same thing here. We'll start. You may not see much of the profile here, but in this second layer, we'll start to see that. Just a little bit shorter than the first ones that we did. And vary the heights of these trees. Okay, I think that color should work. We're doing the same thing, starting from the top. Start there. It's still a little bit wet, and you want it to be that way. You don't want it to be too dry. And I'm just going ahead and making some branches wider at the base. You don't want to completely cover the first one, but you don't have to make special effort to not, because you want that little hide and seek of different layers to show through. What you are doing is actually creating depth by creating multiple layers of trees that you see from front and far. The most interesting trees are the ones that are not so symmetric and not so expected. Like you'll see a tree with a little bald spot there, no branches, and then one branch sticking out too much. Really love playing with the different profiles of the trees. And as you see here, as I go lower, I just kind of use a flatten the brush like this and blend it in, because I'm going to have another layer taking over that space, and it's going to cover it anyway. It's getting a little too dry here, so I took some water on my brush, mixed it in, made it a little bit more wet. But as you can see, if it's dry, then you see the trees a little bit more too clearly and not as blended in as the first layer. To be honest, I don't see much of the first layer. To pick up my daughter. What I'm going to do now, since it's dry, you see what I'm doing here is taking the same color but making it a lot more dilute, and using that to go back and do a little bit of that back layer that I didn't get much of the profile for. You see here, and I'm filling in between, because I didn't get the profile of the first layer as much as I would have liked to. It blended in. So the timing is really critical. Too wet, too dry, and the look and feel and the effect changes quite quickly. All right, I think I like where we are now with the two layers. This one is more blended in the background, and then we have another layer. Now we can wait. We'll come back with a third, maybe a fourth. We'll see. So putting this aside, keeping our moon card aside still, And now we're going to do a very fun technique. Wet and wet and wet on dry. So bring out your third card. And really, really have fun with this one. So easy and just almost magical. So I'm going to do landscape mode for this. A vertical card is portrait. This is landscape. We'll do a landscape mode in here. And putting together two techniques in one. I am not going to draw a line, but if you feel like you need it, feel free to do that. Let me just do a very light line so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just drawing a horizontal line closer to the lower end, but not all the way to the bottom. You want some space for the reflections to come together. In fact, I'm going to do it a little bit higher so there's space for the reflection of each tree. You don't need the line, but we are going to use clear water to start with, and you might not be able to see where the clear water is. So that's that. Do you see the line? Very, very faint. Clear water now, washing my brush, no color in it at all. Medium-sized brush. And I'm going to do a sweep of one stroke of water on that line that I use as a guide now. You see that? It's just a little bit of water with clear water on the brush. You can spread it a little. You see that? And now we're going to work quickly on our trees. I'm going to get some greens. Now this is fun. You could do all kinds of shades you would like. I'm going to do blues and greens and put in a little purple if I can mix in a red to create a nice variety of shades of green. You could do all gray, you could do all black, you could do shades of greens. It's really up to you. Each card will look different and fun, and just explore different variations of it. You do want to keep this line wet, so if it's starting to dry, just put a little bit more color there. All right, now what the color that goes on this wet part would be wet on wet, and the top of it, what we paint, would be wet color on dry paper. So I'm using the green here. I'm going to mix it with some blue to create a slightly darker green, and I'm going to use various shades of it. But what we're doing is the same trees that we did in our sketch. Start well above the line in the dry space. Do your little center line to guide you, but don't go up to the water. And go to the top, start doing the little branches, start with a narrow top, start to make it wider as you go down, and do the little variation in the branches. This is when the magic happens, when you start coming to the bottom and you touch the wet part and you see that blend of the color just kind of spreading out. That's what you want. So you have the nice wet on dry tree on the top, and then you have it just spread into the water. I'm going to make it a little bit darker green to put another tree on the side, maybe taller this time. Doing the same thing. Do the center line if that helps you, and see how it spreads out. I absolutely love painting these cards, and these are so popular. Everyone likes them, and they all want these cards. So I get to paint even more when it's popular. So you see, get a different color here. Now I'm actually going to take just blue to add variety here. Another tree, you can go shorter trees, longer trees, whatever you prefer. Come down, just touch the brush and let it spread like roots or reflection. That's the blue tree. I do want to do a little purple just to bring in some more color to the mix, but not too reddish, just bluish. So it still stays in the family of colors, See, I'm just mixing the blues and the reds to get a bluish purple. To do a short tree here. So there's a lot to do with the techniques and just simple ideas that you can start to put in different ways. Now that I have some red on my palette already, I'm going to take my little fine brush, take some red, and maybe put a little red dot on one of these trees. Just dry. All right, now I have too much purple, not using it that much. I'm going to go back to one of these greens and two more trees here, a short one maybe. The variation in height is what makes it look fun and artistic and not so expected or too planned. So feel free to play with the heights and sometimes the width. How wide do you want it to be? Because each tree is unique, each leaf is unique, each flower is different. No two of them are the same, just like people. They're unique. And here the base is now a little dry. So you see I'm not getting the nice blend. I'm washing my brush, coming back with clear water and making this a little bit wet. So I'd get that nice little natural blend of the watercolor. Let's see, maybe I want to come back with another blue tree. So imagine if you were to do this for fall cards, you could just do a bright set of trees, orange, yellow, green, a little bit of green, brown, and that would look just beautiful like this. I want to do two short trees on the side, any color that I can get on my brush. You really don't have to plan too much. Whatever you have, extra color, use that up. Little greenish blue. I hope you're having fun and I hope you are giving yourself a chance to just explore and experiment and not get too worried about the outcome, because this is supposed to be fun, and the more you do, the easier it gets and it starts to become so much fun. All right, that's this card. What I do like to do in this is, because there's just so much white space around it, I like to do a nice little border. This is just me. I like to do a freehand border because I like the freehand nature of the border. It's not coming out of a machine or a printer, and you want it to reflect that handmade touch to it. So here's what I'm doing. I'm using the purple blend, but I'm not going to limit it to it. I'm just going to go blues and greens and just let it all blend. Do a little border. You could also break the line and put a little message there. It could say joy or peace or love right in here. I also like to do the border where it's touching the picture so it's not too fixed. Leave some space. All the colors that I've used in the painting is what I'm blending in with the borders. These are some things you don't get from a machine or a printer. That's what makes all of these unique. So I think card number 2 is ready. Any questions about this one? Ready to set it aside? Bringing back card number 1. Now, once again, I'm going back to the medium size brush. I do need to wipe my palette a little because it's just too messy right now. When I don't have a chance to go and wash it at the sink, I take the kitchen towel, dip it in water, or just if this is too wet, and just wipe it. That's the reason why I like these ceramic little plates to use. You can wipe it clean and start right over without having to step away. So I have a clean palette once again, ready to go. See? Once again, going back to our blues with a touch of black to get a bluish gray. It's still very loose, but it's not as watery as it was before. And we're going to go in here, do the same thing, but a third layer. This time around, I'm going to keep it a little shorter than the first 2 layers. So we can still see the 2 layers, the profile, and have the third layer on top of it. Center line. Now you want to go a little slower than before because these are the trees that are closer to you. So they won't be, you will still see more of the profile and the overall shape of the tree. Unlike the first 2 layers where they were blending in with the background with each other. If you think your medium-sized brush is too thick, you can go in for the tops, especially with the finer brush, and then swap the brushes or see what you're most comfortable with and how big your strokes are. So I did feel like I wanted to at least start with the fine brush and then go in with the wider brush. So I'm keeping both of them quite ready. See, I'm swapping the brushes pretty frequently in this one. You do want it to blend at the base where they get wider. You won't be able to see one tree from another. This is so easy, but when it's done, it does just so hard to tell it's easy. And most people tell me, oh, wow, this is so intricate, such fine work. And it's only me who knows that once you know the technique, the overall profile, you're really not designing or planning every branch. It, the brush allows you to, um, it allows it to take that form and looks very detailed. It's your secret. Right, I am seeing three distinct layers, but not so distinct that they look plastic. They are blended enough. This is the closest, then I see trees behind that and some really far away. So now we'll come back and do the fourth layer, but let it completely dry and we'll go with a really dark tone on top of it. So putting it aside one more time. And we bring the moon card back in. So I'm thinking maybe we should do a nice pinkish gray evening sky so we can get some color into our work today. I can still use this because it's very little color. Bringing back the big fatter brush. You see the color of this clear water is now a grayish, bluish pink with all the washes I've done. But I think it might be fine for now because that's the color we are going for. But feel free to change the water frequently. I should be changing right now, but I should have planned better and I should have had one more jar of water ready to go. So we'll start with the top. You see this little line here that defines the ground. You can come close to it, but not all the way to it because the two planes, this is a horizontal and a vertical plane. The ground is horizontal and the sky is vertical in your drawing. You don't want them to completely blend. You want them to be, for us to be able to see the difference between the two. So we'll start with the top. Because we have this masking tape on it, we can paint over it and we will still have one. When we remove it, it will still be clean for us to do the paint the moon. So what I have here is clear water on my palette, and I'm going in with a little bit of pink, or you could use a teeny bit of the red or the purple that you have. Of course, we don't want it too pink, but the evening sky starts to have that nice pink touch to it. Still using this bluish gray, and you see how I have this nice purple and a little bit of pink there. I think I just need a little more color. Um, but those are the shades I'm trying to get. Once again, really like 90% water and a dash of color, not much color at all. Oh, that's too black. I don't want this to look very black. I want it to still look fresh. I'm gonna go in with some blue. Just blending it on your palette and go from there. All right, once again, we will do our first layer is clear water, like we did before. But in this one, we'll do only maybe 2 layers, maybe 3, but not as much as the misty winter forest. Just made the paper wet. Don't make it too wet. We will end up waiting too long. Now I'm going to start with the pink first because the gray can quickly overtake it. So you don't want, then the pink won't show on top of it. When you use watercolors, you always want to plan the layers. If you'd go dark first, you won't be able to put a lighter tone on it. So you just have to make sure that you put the lighter colors first and the dark can go on top of it. So we're doing this nice, very light watery pink, and we'll blend it with the grayish pinkish purple. I wish I had a name for these colors. It's just blend it, see what you like it and then go from there. So now I'm taking some of the bluish gray and just going to put it there. So these will blend by themselves, so you don't have to go back and forth and kind of try too hard to blend. That's what the water and the paper, texture of the paper will do, just like our first one. You could also do a dash of orange if you don't want to do pinks. The evening sky is just so dramatic. It amazes me on the colors that you would see the bright purples and the orange too. Just adding a little bit more gray in some spots so it doesn't look too candy pink. And a nice blend. Another technique which we're not using today is when this dries, and if you see it's too much color, you can take a clear water on your brush, and on a dry one, just rub it over it and you'll remove color. So you could get a little lighter tones if you prefer to. I'm gonna hold this off here. Going to do the base. In this, I'm just going in with the very watered down black with a teeny bit of this grayish tone. We won't color the whole thing because you want it to look like there is snow and you're only giving it a little touch of color to show that there is a ground. So you see I'm holding my brush very flat like this, not this way, not like you hold your pencil, but flat. And there is no water on this. This is wet on dry. And you want the texture of the paper. So what I'm doing, let me do it on this one here. This is flat and I'm doing this. You see that? You see that texture I'm getting? That's wet on dry. And we want that texture because we're trying to show that the ground really has snow and this is just defining it a little. So you see how it's just a touch of the brush. And this is the kind of texture we're trying to get on the ground. So very little color, hold the brush and not too much water. Hold it down and just define the ground. We don't have to, you can also do a wave-like thing because you'll see how there is a mound on the ground and snow collects on it. That's really it. That's your ground. Don't want to touch it too much. If it's too dark, you can always let it dry, come back with clear water, and then erase it or blend it like I'm doing here. Only if you think you got too much color or it's not what you're looking for. That's how you would erase in watercolor. So I'm going to set this aside to dry, and then we'll come back and finish the bare tree branches. Bring back our card number 1 to do the last layer on it. Lorraine, do we have any questions or comments?
No, nothing yet. Just a couple of people saying that they're going to practice this more at home.
Sounds good. So now I'm going to bring out the finer brush, the smallest you have. This is black. It's going to be almost black, but in watercolor, you usually don't want to use black because as soon as you mix water in it, it becomes gray. So I like to use really, really dark tones of brown or really dark blues to do what black would do otherwise. So it looks almost black. But today I took the black, but so it doesn't become too gray, I'm going to add some blue to it so it still doesn't have that grayish look to it, and it'll stay in the monochrome theme that we're doing here. So it's blue with black. If you look closely on my palette, you'll see I'm blending in the blue. Nice dark deeper color. In this case we have a lot of water because we want to have the ease of doing nice free flowing trees, but at the same time we don't want them to be blending so much. This is the last layer that's going to really stand out closest to where we view it from. Same thing, we are going to start with the mid center line of the tree, vary the heights for a nice natural tree profile, put some in the middle. This is also a great time to hide some of the background trees that you think are not looking the best. you can overlay it with this layer. So, just get creative on what you want to see, what you want to hide, and then do the same thing. But now we're going to go a little slower so we can see the branches. If this was taped down, which I actually could do right now, I'm going to take some of the, the tape, maybe just 2 pieces to keep this down, not creating a border, but putting it at the base for it to stay in place. All right, that should help. You might go a little slower, and that's perfectly fine. This is this layer is wet on dry because our base has dried. And really, I do this so much. I really, really enjoy doing this that I can go fairly fast. But take your time, control the shape and the bend of the branches. In watercolor, you do have to sometimes speed up too much, sometimes just wait for it to get to the right level of dryness. So yeah, it does take practice to know what to do in each layer. I thought I wanted a taller tree here to just mark the edge of the card. All right, that's really it. If you see here, we have a lot of background taking up the space, which is really important to create this effect. You want it to look like a very quiet, calm, peaceful morning, and that space is what's creating that mood. The only other thing I'd like to do is once again take the very fine brush and take very little color on your brush to do very tiny birds in the sky, just to kind of have something in the sky. But be very careful, they will look very tiny. They should be, if you're thinking of perspective and scale. If these are the trees, your birds will be that tiny there. Or you could just take the pencil or a black very fine tip pen to do these v-shaped birds. I'll show you what I'm doing here on this paper. Literally, you're just doing this, right? But tiny, 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 like that size. And maybe a pencil would be best here to do a really tiny one. If you're using color, like I'll do this with the brush, the ones closer to you may have some color to begin with, but if it's a bird that's far, it will be so gray and so blended, like just a dash of water, because they're blending into the mist. So you shouldn't be able to see it too defined or too big or too clear. Right, that's it. Those are the tiny birds. Too many. So that's card number one. I'll talk a little bit about mounting it on cardstock and giving it a border, just like we did on this one too. So it looks more complete and done. So that's, we have two cards just about ready to be mounted, and we will come and complete this. This is almost dry. And what I'd like to do now is, if it's dry and if you feel it's ready, I'm going to peel off the little piece of tape. Now keep in mind, different papers respond differently. Sometimes they'll peel off more paper and the base. So you don't want it to spoil the rest of the background. Like I'm doing, I'm turning it around. Even if it peels off a layer of the base paper, I want it to be contained in that space. So that's the moon. I'm gonna take my medium sized brush, go in with a tad gray tone in the brush, give it a little nice shape here because I didn't cut it perfectly to get a nice circle. And the moon always has a little shades of grays and different tones in there. So you do want to do that, but a lot of water and very little color. You don't want it to get black or too dark. So you're really kind of just suggesting the shape here. See that? Keep it incomplete. Most of it white, a little color to define the edges. That's the moon. That's it. Now we're going to switch over to the finer brush, this one. Once again, the dark color, you could use almost all black if you prefer to, or a very dark brown, or a very, very deep blue. But it's the branch and no leaves on it, so we want it to be really dark. And it's nighttime, so you don't see much of the color. Even if it is a brown branch in the evening, it looks more almost like black. So remember, we did the tree branches here. Start with the main trunk, split, go around, split, split some more. The further out it is, it gets finer and not as thick. So that's what we'll do here. If you feel that you need to draw it first, feel free to do that. Actually, why not? Let's do that. But I would recommend, don't draw every last branch. Just draw enough to show you where the tree should be, how long and how tall it should be, so you know when to stop. But don't draw every branch. You want a nice natural flow to it. What I like to do, one of my favorite things, is to just have the branch kind of frame the moon and a little part of the branch going on top of the moon. Not too much, but just enough to show how it naturally spreads and be in front of the bright moon. So this is all I'm going to draw, and we'll add additional branches as we go. You want the color to be a good thick consistency, but not so thick that it doesn't flow well on the paper. So I kind of drew the mid branch. Now I'm going to make it thicker here. Branching it out. going here, this branch. This one shouldn't have been so thick, but now it is what it is. So I'm going to make the base a little bit wider so it doesn't look disproportionate. So a little branch here. And this one is going to be, you'll see a little ground behind it and a little of the sky. Kind of connects the two planes. Now, this is where I want to be very careful. I don't want to mess up on top of the moon. So I wiped off color from my brush, doing a fine branch here. I have to remind myself to stop. Sometimes it's just enough to do what I want to do, and I tend to overdo it because just having too much fun and you don't want to stop. This may be the time for me to stop. If you want to do another smaller tree next to it, go for it. It's always looks lonely to have just one. You can have a younger tree here, like a smaller one. Gives it more dimension, I guess. Now you want to wash your brush, and it may have only a little color in it, which is fine, just this much. Very watered down. You see this? And we are going to do a little shadow of the tree. So if the light is coming from behind, the tree may be casting a shadow like this. That's all you want to do, just a very little bit of shadow, just so it looks so real. That's it. You have the snowy foreground. You have the evening sky, casting some shadow here. And that's your, as some of you may know, I usually like to do some splatter because it's not fun without doing any splatter. So let's splatter on all three cards in one go. And we are almost at time, but I think we have time to finish this up. Those are our two cards, and that's the third. Going to take my medium-sized brush, bring out the white. That's white. Take some water, nice and loose water here, white color. When you have too much color on the brush, you'll get big splatters. When you have less color, you'll get fine splatter. This is snow for our winter landscapes. So we could do a nice splatter of snow on all of these. I don't want it to be too stark on this misty one. So let's start with this. You see the white snow on the branches? That's just so beautiful. Let me show it to you closer. You see that? I don't know about you, but I just get so excited when I do these very simple little tricks and they're just magical. Move this over. Now this doesn't have as much color as the first round of splatter, and I want to do it more on the front trees because that's where I will see the snow, not so much in the misty sky. And finer towards the back, and then a little bit to let it blend into that sky. And that's it. This is card number 2 with the snow splatter. And we'll bring this back to do a little splatter on this. It might not show much, but whatever falls on the trees will look nice. Those are 3 winter landscapes. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. I am going to show you how I mount it on the cards. I'm sure you will all come up with more creative ways to do it. This one, if I were to put this on the cardstock, you see how it pops? But the card gives it a nice border. This is a 5x7 card, and my paper is 4x6. You could glue it on top of this and do a little dark blue line around it, or a black line around it, so it kind of defines your landscape. Or like this one, you could do the same. This, if you mount it, this is how your card will look. And do a black line or a gray line, or if you want more color, you could do a nice purple or pink line around this one too. And this is our third one. When you put it on the cardstock, this would open this way. And we have the border here. What I do like to do, especially on this one, I'm going to take the next minute to do it, bringing my fine brush out. I do miss a little red in this, so I'm bringing the red out. And that's it for today. I wish you all joy, peace, and have a wonderful holiday season. Get creative, paint some cards, send it to your loved ones, and have a wonderful holiday season.